Hi, I'm Paul Marcel. So now that we got No Comment 2 build done, and you actually tolerated that whole hour-long video, sorry, next time I think I know how I'm going to edit that a little bit shorter to make it just as good, but shorter for you. But what I'd like to do now is start on the build videos, and we're going to start with the design of this table. Now, the design was, it's not a SketchUp file with all dimensions and all that. You can tell that basically by the way I was using, cardboard. So I'll go over how the idea kind of hatched itself a long time ago and then where things changed as I was doing the build. But first, there are a couple things about where this table is going that actually dictated some of the dimensions, some of the aspects of the table. So easiest thing to do, let me take this inside. I'll take you inside so we can see where it's going to go, and I'll explain to you why certain things are the way they are. So let's go. You can wear your shoes in the house. So this is the table that No Comment number 2 is going to be replacing. I've had this demi-lune up here at the top of the stairs for quite a while, and I really like the way the demi-lune format works up here because of the way that it kind of eliminates a corner here right where things get a little bit narrow. And also, there's enough tables and things that are square in here, including myself. So let me put No Comment number 2 in here, and we can talk about the design a little bit more. Now, a couple of the things about the design were dictated by this location and what I really wanted. Now, the fact that this frame is cherry and the top is cherry is more of a coincidence than anything else. I had some really nice figured curly cherry that I wanted to use for this top, and that was actually why I chose it. Now, the underside of this, I really wanted it to be scalloped like this or shaped in some way, and also I wanted the general oval for the top. I didn't want it to be, exactly traced out with a compass or anything. I wanted it to be a little bit kind of just done by hand grinding. So that's also actually why there's some little scallop marks on the top as well that show through to the top to give it a little bit more interest. So from the top, it's going to look like a demi-lune that's got a little bit of an interesting shape to it. But from the underside, it's really got a lot of extra work. The reason for that is because of the stairwell that I have here on the side. As you walk up the stairs, you can really see the legs. It's the first thing that jumps out at you when you're looking at it. And also, you can see the undulations under here that we shaped. Now, those actually are much more pronounced during the day when I have kind of a raking daylight coming in from behind where the camera is located. You really get to see the extra shadow lines that makes. And it also accents that black glaze that I put on here. So that was used so that I could accent the tapered octagon in the back. So having this scalloped underside and kind of worked legs was important to me to make sure that you had something different to see on the way up that caught your attention. Then when you got here and you were looking down, the table looks different because you're not seeing all that. So the initial design also had, besides the scalloped underside, had 5 legs in it, and I wanted the top of the legs to kind of present a sweep. And they do sweep just enough. And if you saw in the build video where I clamped all the legs together and then I drew 2 sweeping marks on those, that was actually an impromptu thing I decided just minutes before doing that I didn't like the idea of these legs just being a straight taper down to the ground, to the foot. What I wanted is I wanted something different. So I drew those little half circles and I thought, I'll figure out what I'm going to do with these sweeps later. And as I was shaping them, I decided to make them look like knuckles. So in a way, we have a knuckle here that angles towards the center and then comes back up. And then the same goes at the other level. And I'm really liking the way those knuckles came out. That was a great impromptu addition to the legs. So the underside is very curvy. It's very shaped by hand. It's very scalloped by hand. The outside edge of this is very much just done by hand with minimal guide. What I wanted to counter that with was to counter it with something that was a very exact shape made with tight angles and flat surfaces. So that's where the tapered octagon comes in. I wanted something that looked like a tapered octagon or maybe a hexagon, whichever one, piercing through the tabletop and then having the legs attached to that, the tabletop cantilevered. So that part of the design was in there from the start as a bit of a requirement. Now, I chose an octagon because it works a little bit better for the placement of the legs. But also, this entire top, though I wanted it to pierce through, and this to you looks like, well, that's piercing through, this isn't the way I initially envisioned it. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how I initially envisioned it down in the shop where we have a lot more lighting and we can look at it from the back where we can see kind of a projection of the octagon. But one of the important things I did want is I did want this sort of cap. I wanted a visual cap on the top. And the initial thought was instead of using onyx, since that was just a lucky find, I was going to take a turning blank of some very highly figured wood, cut it down to a rough shape, kind of do my own kiln drying with a box with a small incandescent light in it, and then afterwards shape it to its final shape up here. So it would have a very different look from the rest of it. Now obviously with it being onyx, it's an extremely different look, but it's one that I happen to like. However, I did make this entire top with hide glue so that I can reverse all of this, and in fact the stone is just sitting in it. So if I decided later I want to do something like Australian stringwood, I can do a blank of that. And in fact, that was the initial idea, was to use Australian stringwood. Now on this extra level, the idea is that, say you collected things like vases, it would be nice if you had a table like this with possibly multiple levels. You could see making multiple of these octagons piercing through the bottom at different projections, coming across at different heights, and then vases and things like that could be stacked across, or anything small that could stand up and be presented on a surface like this. In my case, one of my uncles worked in the Canadian Arctic for several decades as a geomorphic cartographer. So I got introduced to Inuit art a long time ago as a kid, and I've always liked it. So soapstone carvings that the Inuit Eskimos do and the like. So what I thought of putting here is, if you were to look at this marquetry and actually a ceramic up there of another bird, this area has a lot of kind of bird art in it. So what I thought of doing is, I have several different Inuit art sculptures that are birds, and those would be placed on here. They're smaller, so it's not going to be too big, but they are heavy. They're all stone. But what I would place up here is an inukshuk. An inukshuk is, so this is a very small version of an inukshuk. This would normally be at the entrance of a village for the Inuits. It would just be, it's made to look like a man. So I would place this here and then place the bird around it, so that I kind of keep the whole theme of Inuits here, but while keeping this whole area birds. Okay, so let me take this back down to the shop, and we're going to talk about the different ideas I had for the top and what they would have looked like. Now, the initial idea was that this would be pierced, so the octagon would continue up and continue to be the octagon, so it would look as if it went right through the table. But then the little piece that's on the top, with it looking like this, it just wasn't working for me. I put it on there, looked at it, didn't like it. I think the problem is that it's not very high. I think if it came up higher, it would look different, but then I think it would look silly because it looks too tall. So it doesn't look good that way either. So erase that and get back to where we started. So this turns out that this is the offcut that was removed for inside here. So then I flipped it upside down and then came up with this. And that's what we have right now. So I do like the look of it. It does look like it pierces through. It's not the original idea, but that's okay. I got a chance to modify it. It wasn't very difficult to modify. Although some of the things that I was doing with the dominoes piercing all the way through, those I didn't get to take advantage of fully. They do help. But we're going to revisit the original design where it goes all the way up and through when we get to the domino episode, because it's going to show a technique that you can do with something like the Domozilla, which has the longer plunge length, so that you can actually clamp this cantilevered top and make it significantly stronger. Now in this case here, table's not all that heavy. I could get away with using some screws to reinforce what I lost by having to change this design. And no one's the wiser unless they watch this episode.